This discussion is going to focus on supplements, and we're going to be looking at natural and ergogenic supplements. One thing I do want to point out is there's going to be some information not discussed in the text. I've taken some other, looking at some of the more recent developments in supplementation to kind of augment what is in the textbook. So there will be some additional information here. Again, I do want you to still review the textbook, as some of that information will be pertinent. And so what we're going to do is really look at a range of supplements and really kind of look at what has been proven to work and be safe and what really hasn't been, so that you're well up on when if an athlete or someone comes and asks you about a supplement, you'll be able to kind of give them a fair analysis of them. So in looking at natural supplements or things that are labeled as natural, essentially all we're really looking at with this is something that's not artificial and produced by nature. It doesn't necessarily equate with complete safety. Your textbook also talks about how it doesn't necessarily make it organic. There's a difference between something being labeled natural and something being labeled as organic. Organic refers to things that are certified and grown without the use of artificial fertilizers and pesticides. So just because something's natural doesn't mean it's organic. It can be both, but it doesn't necessarily assume that. So the other thing is that it's commonly associated with being safe. And remember, anything taken in the body has the potential to create a negative response. That's any type of food, that's any type of medicine. So people hear natural, a lot of times they automatically think that it's completely safe, and it's not necessarily the case. So that's something to keep in mind as well. The American Botanical Council is an organization that kind of looks at different types of natural supplements. Herbal supplements are supplements that are going to be plant-derived. And they could be annual, biennial, or perennial plants. Many times you will see in some supplements, you'll see the terms phytochemical or phytomedical. Basically what that means is that something is plant-derived. So anytime you see phyto in front of something, that's referencing that it's derived from a plant source. With all the increased use in supplementation, the United States government actually passed a law that allows supplement companies to promote substances by means of certain statements. So the 1994 law, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, basically stated that a company can promote natural substances or supplements as being able to improve function and improve health, but the key is they cannot claim that the supplement will affect a disease process. So it cannot come right out and state that a certain supplement can help to help in the treatment of a disease. So it's some of the wording and everything that gets caught up with all of this, but it's important to note that this act basically kind of limited what companies can actually promote as far as their natural substances or what their supplements can actually do. So one thing to note, a lot of basically your supplements are not subject to the same laws as over-the-counter and prescription drugs through the FDA. So once the Dietary Supplement and Health Education Act was passed, it kind of impacted what was allowed to be sold and what wasn't allowed to be sold in stores and basically under what claims. So an example of this was DHEA. So DHEA is identified as a testosterone precursor. Obviously, if taken in excess, can possibly cause liver problems. Well, the FDA banned the sale of this substance in the 1980s, but after the passage of the Dietary Supplement Health Education Act, it was put back on the market as a health supplement. So again, what it could be marketed as is kind of limited, but it was be able to put back on the market as a supplement upon passage of that act. In looking at risk factors when you're taking something that's considered a natural or an herbal supplement, the textbook talks about 4 basic risks. 1 is the purity of the supplement, 2 is the toxic side effects, 3 is the interactive effects with other drugs or supplements, and then the last one is contamination through the actual processing and getting it out into the market. The question becomes, are they regulated? A lot of the manufacturing process is not regulated by the federal government, so there is the potential for contamination. However, as you see, especially nowadays with a lot of supplements, there are regulating bodies that do kind of oversee supplementation. So this has changed quite a bit over the years. There's always the potential, and I think probably one of the basic risks that you have to be aware of, especially given the fact all the medications people are on nowadays, are the interactive effects, regardless what type of supplement somebody takes. Be it more, just natural vitamin type supplementation versus even with ergogenics, you have to look at the interactive effects that you see with other types of drugs. So in looking at supplement purity, one of the big concerns early on with supplementation is that, since the standards aren't as strict, the concern about the labeling standards, the labeling not matching up with what is in the actual supplement. We have a little study here that was done and discussed in the textbook, just kind of showing some of the issues with the supplement in regards to what was actually in the supplement versus what was on the label. So that being a problem, again, some other organizations have come out to kind of put a little bit more strict regulations on this to prevent, again, an athlete possibly taking something that they don't even realize is either in greater amounts that could possibly cause an interaction with a drug, or even possibly containing an illegal or an improper amount of a drug. So again, that's something that has certainly improved over the years, but could still potentially be an issue. Toxicity. So looking at supplement toxicity, you look at how much of a dose of the herb you're actually looking at. And again, that could also be influenced by other drugs taken by the individual as well. So, again, toxicity being, you look at some various toxic reactions, everything from skin rashes to liver toxicity. So it's another issue related to, some of these herbal and what would be considered natural drugs that could possibly cause problems. So when you look at some of the toxicity and some of the reactions, again, that's something that you need to be mindful of as well. Supplement and drug interactions. So here's a list. This is taken from your textbook, but you can see some of the supplements or some of the natural supplements and some of their potential interactions that they can have with either their over-the-counter or possibly prescription drugs. So if you read this list, again, there's some others in your textbook that you can look at as well as examples of the drug interaction. So if somebody is on a drug or even has another type of health condition, they should be aware of that and possibly even discouraged from using certain types of herbal-based or natural-based supplements. And the last of the issues we're going to look at with this is supplement contamination. So a lot of the production and manufacturing process, again, not regulated quite to the same level by the FDA as a lot of your over-the-counter and prescription drugs are concerned. However, if there is a formal complaint, a company can be investigated. So it is important to note that can take place. So when we look at a lot of the contamination issues, we have some of the things listed here. So some issues could come in with the species of the plant, the soil, the fertility, the certain part of the plant that gets used, and then the actual extraction process can all be sources of contamination with the supplements. Again, based on the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, the FDA does give guidelines. It's up to the manufacturer to follow the guidelines. Again, if they don't, they don't necessarily come down on them right away, but if there is a formal complaint that gets put forth, they can be investigated by the FDA. So examining some of our individual supplements and ergogenic aids, dehydroepiandrosterone, DHEA, it is a substance that is banned by the World Anti-Doping Agency. DHEA is naturally produced by the adrenal glands, and it is a prohormone. It is typically converted into androstenedione, which was another supplement that we had talked about earlier, and then that is what produces testosterone. So it's basically taken from the standpoint of being a testosterone precursor. And the idea is from the athletic ergogenic standpoint is that it again helps in producing testosterone, which could help in producing lean muscle mass. It is on the list of banned substances. The long-term effects of taking it are unknown, specifically with the endocrine and hormonal system, given the fact that it is a testosterone precursor. Beta-hydroxymethabutrate, or HMB, is an amino acid used for cholesterol synthesis, and it's basically taken for what is thought of to be as anti-catabolic effects. So again, when individuals, say for instance, weight train, the breakdown effects that occur after a training session are said to be limited by the supplement. HMB is created naturally when we metabolize the amino acid leucine, which leucine is an important amino acid we're going to discuss later on. So leucine is found in high concentrations in the muscle, and it's actually thought that the HMB will signal for the muscle to not break down. So that's what the concept behind this is, to how it improves strength and reduces muscle breakdown through this signaling. HMB is really found to be most effective in those just beginning an exercise. So in other words, for people who have been strength training long term, it's been found that it won't necessarily help those as much that have greater experience versus those who are just beginning an exercise program. So that's kind of what a lot of the more recent research has found with this. It is a relatively safe supplement. Short-term supplementation does not affect liver functioning, blood lipids, the kidneys, or the immune system. So it is considered a safe supplement to take. Again, as far as effectiveness, typically found to be most effective in those who just begin a strength training program. Probably one of the more popular supplements, and one that has been researched quite a bit, is creatine. So creatine is produced by the body on a daily basis, and it's basically formed from amino acids naturally in about 1 to 2 grams a day. Most people get some creatine just through their diet, through the consumption of meat and fish. The people do get some creatine through that mechanism. So 95% of the creatine in the body is actually present in an individual's skeletal muscle. The phosphocreatine form is, and that's the concept behind creatine supplementation, is increased phosphocreatine, is used by the body to reconstitute ADP to ATP. So ATP is your immediate energy source. Okay, so when you look at a lot of your explosive actions, those are fueled by ATP. ATP gets broken down in those as an immediate energy source. And the idea here, by supplementing with creatine, you enhance the muscle cell's ability to produce energy. So in other words, you help with the recovery and have a greater pool of phosphocreatine to be able to reconstitute the ATP. There have been a lot of studies done. Most of the studies have been done on the 18 to 35-year-old range, obviously being athletes, and that being typically the range where a lot of people are starting to supplement. And we're going to talk a little bit later on, coming up here, a little bit more into the science behind why this works, and look at, is it a safe supplement to take? So again, further kind of looking at how does creatine work. So the liver breaks it down to phosphocreatine again, and that's the phosphate. When the phosphate becomes available again, as we were discussing just on the previous slide, you get to then work with ADP to form ATP, and it provides as an energy source. So again, that's the energy for short exercise bouts. And if you think of typically the athletes who take creatine and they're training, obviously the biggest connection is with weight training and creatine. So again, short bouts of exercise. One of the things that did kind of come out that were sort of looked at, but there's not much proof behind it, was, does creatine stimulate growth hormone release? And it's been suggested, but there's not a whole lot of proof in the research to kind of support that notion. So again, we do look at the actual regeneration of ATP, and that being the real benefit to creatine. As far as it affecting, again, for instance, growth hormone release, that there's not much proof to show a direct link with that. So looking at how people usually take creatine, creatine is usually taken in powder form. There's other forms of administration have been designed. The powdered form seems to have stood the test of time as really the most effective way to take it. It is usually purchased in what's known as creatine monohydrate, and the creatine monohydrate form essentially just allows it to be more readily used by the body. Typically, a lot of individuals will mix it with a fruit juice, and that just allows for a greater uptake, and just kind of helps with the availability with the body, and a lot of that has to do with the insulin release. Insulin seems to be a trigger to kind of help with the creatine uptake. We look at the concept of how it's usually dosed throughout the day, and some people have advocated for a loading phase, where an individual will take 20 grams a day for a short period of time and then take what's called a maintenance dose. And a lot of the recent research shows that you don't necessarily need the loading phase. Back when creatine first came out, there were a lot of proponents for the loading phase, and it doesn't seem to be it. What a lot of people say is that long term, if you take the smaller dosages, that it can be just as effective long term as taking it as the loading dose. So here we have, if someone was going to do a loading phase, it would be about 20 grams a day for about 7 days, and then for the remainder of the supplementation, they would take the daily dosage, or what someone could just do is just take the daily dosage for a longer period of time. Again, noting that the body will regularly use about 1 to 2 grams of creatine a day, plus you will be getting a small amount with, again, a diet, as long as one is consuming meat. Where individuals get the most benefits with creatine are with anaerobic efforts, particularly very short explosive-based anaerobic efforts. So individuals in weightlifting, short sprint activities where the rest periods allow people to regenerate their ATP and repeat maximal efforts. Those are the individuals that tend to get the greatest benefits from creatine. Also looking at trained versus untrained, something to keep in mind is that people who've trained for a long period of time and store large amounts of creatine in their body naturally, they may not get as much of a benefit as an untrained athlete. So people who have higher resting levels of creatine in their body may not get the same benefits as somebody who doesn't, as someone who is either untrained or has lower levels. So that's something to be mindful of as well. So it has been shown to be beneficial to these to anaerobic efforts, and again, those who tend to not store as much creatine in their body also tend to have greater benefits with the supplementation. So what are the effects of supplementation with creatine? Well, there's no effect on a lot of the issues with heart rates. There's no effect on resting heart rate, no effect on exercising heart rate, no effect on post-lactate accumulation. There is, however, an increase in muscle cross-sectional area for all fiber types in individuals that do supplement with creatine. So again, we look at, strength-based activities, power-based activities, deriving the maximum benefit from creatine supplementation. So in looking at creatine and performance, some things to keep in mind: more beneficial to untrained than on trained people, and it benefits really those involved in short, intense burst type activities. So sprinters, weightlifters, obviously people in weightlifting for their field-based sport where strength and power is important, which is important for most athletes in that instance, but that's where the greatest benefit will come in. You're not going to get as much of an endurance aerobic benefit through creatine supplementation. So in kind of looking at, again, the exercise science aspect of it. So again, activities lasting less than 30 seconds, where the ATP PC system comes in, that's where your greatest ergogenic effect is going to take place. Very limited support for activities lasting beyond 30 seconds. So in athletes trying to improve their speed, improve their muscular strength, again, this is where the greatest benefits for creatine will come in. Now, some dietary factors related to creatine supplementation and things that'll help. In vegetarians, there's actually an increased response. And again, this is just because of the fact they have less dietary creatine because of the fact they don't eat meat. So the supplementation for vegetarians will actually probably produce a very beneficial response just based on that. Carb loading, again, the insulin release can help increase the benefits of creatine. I talked earlier about how usually a lot of times when people take creatine in its plain powdered form, they'll usually take it with a grape juice or an orange juice, and that's because of, again, the insulin release will help with the uptake of creatine. And caffeine's another thing that, taken in conjunction with creatine, could actually help enhance the effects of creatine. It was actually thought at one time that caffeine interfered with the effects of creatine, and not only did they find that not to be true, but they actually found that caffeine actually helps with the benefit from creatine. So caffeine can certainly enhance, and what we're going to talk about later on is a type of supplement that actually combines caffeine and creatine in one, and some of the benefits of that. Related to any adverse effects noted with creatine supplementation, it's important to note that the adverse effects that are reported are all anecdotal. They're not based on any research. So the type of adverse effects you commonly hear: kidney damage, dehydration, muscle cramping, GI distress, diarrhea. Again, all anecdotal. Nothing has been proven in research to show that these are actually side effects of creatine supplementation. So creatine supplementation, for the most part, given the nature of the fact that there's been a lot of research done on creatine, it's probably one of the most researched supplements. It is likely a safe supplement for most individuals to take. Chromium picolinate is a trace mineral that's utilized for carbohydrate and fat metabolism. It does work with insulin. This is a mineral that gets supplemented as a way to help change body composition, or at least that's the purported use of supplementation with chromium picolinate. So this is the basis for this. So we're going to examine this and look at is it effective and are there any adverse effects. So in looking at, is chromium picolinate a supplement that you would want to suggest or recommend? One thing is the potential increased urinary output of creatine, which could potentially be a bad thing for individuals. There is no change in body composition noted with supplementation. So, the research isn't really solid on it actually doing what it's purported to do. Again, the adverse effects, as we have listed here, these are all based on anecdotal evidence. So is it deemed definitively effective for what it's purported for? No, but it's also not, the adverse effects are all deemed anecdotal. So it's likely a relatively safe supplement, but as to whether it actually produces the benefit that it states is unlikely. Just looking at vitamins and minerals in general, so something to note about vitamin supplementation, a lot of people do take a multivitamin, which is kind of a good insurance gap for most vitamins, just based on everyday diet. A couple things to note: vitamin supplementation in general does not improve athletic performance, and has no effect on post-exercise recovery. So again, when you look at vitamins, you have to look at, again, why are you supplementing with the vitamins? One that has gotten some attention is the use of vitamin E. So they are currently looking at whether or not vitamin E supplementation may be good for endurance athletes, just because of the antioxidant properties, just because of all the oxidative stress that occurs, particularly with endurance athletes. But in general, you would say that vitamin supplementation is not something absolutely necessary, particularly for those who have a good diet. Again, the only possible recommendation you might want to give is, in general, a multivitamin is usually something, again, it's relatively safe. Do people need to take one? No, but it could just be kind of an insurance gap, if you will, for the diet.